Faith. The ninth fruit of the Holy Ghost is faith. By this it is meant that life of faith by which we look on all things, good or evil, as coming from God, and are constantly looking forward, as St. Paul did, to the reward promised to those who while on earth live and labor for God alone and for heaven. St. Cyrenius, the Gardener. Whosoever lives a life of faith will find means of instructing himself and of sanctifying himself at every step he takes. St. Cyrenius was only a simple gardener, but as he looked on the plants and flowers, amongst which he labored daily, growing up until they arrived at maturity, he would say to himself, "This is how I ought to live, to reach the end for which I was made. It is my duty to labor without ceasing, to advance from virtue to virtue, and to perform all my actions, direct all my thoughts, and regulate all my desires, so as to attain that perfection that God requires of me." St. Alderic at the court of the Emperor. When St. Alderic was a little boy, his parents brought him to the court of Louis, the son of Charlemagne. The emperor loved him. He was so noble in all his ways, so full of courage, and so truthful and straightforward in all his words. The boy was also surrounded with everything that this world can offer to make one happy. But Alderic, although so young, did not allow his heart to rest on these things. He knew that riches and worldly joys and a life of pleasure are not only dangerous, but must also soon pass away. He used often to be heard saying to himself, "All the riches I enjoy are only the dust of the earth. Why should I put any value on them?" He was living in the midst of the other boys who thought very differently from him, but he did not allow their bad example to change his resolution to love and serve God alone. The child Jesus was the model he had always before his eyes, and he tried to do what Jesus did when he was a little boy like himself. The Tartars besiege a church. Saint Hyacinth had just completed a magnificent church in Poland, which he dedicated to the Most Holy Mother of God. One day, as he was just finished the celebration of Holy Mass, it was announced to him that the Tartars, the most implacable enemies of the Christian names, had reached the walls of the town and were endeavoring to force an entrance. The saint was much surprised at this information, but he did not allow himself to be disturbed. He feared less the ruin of the city and the church than the outrages without number which these barbarians would inflict on the innocent people, and the sacrileges they would commit against holy things, especially the most holy sacrament of the altar. Full of confidence in God, he reverently opened the tabernacle, and taking out the ciborium, he concealed it under his tunic near his heart. Then, turning towards the religious who were standing around him, trembling with fear, he said to them, "Follow me, my brethren, and be not afraid." But when he came near the door of the church, he heard a loud voice which cried out, "Hyacinth, Hyacinth!" He stood and looked all around, but could see no one, so he turned to continue on his way. Immediately he heard the same voice again saying the same words. Once more he looked behind him, and to his great astonishment and that of all those who accompanied him, he perceived that it proceeded from the statue of Our Lady, which was placed on an altar near the center of the church. It was made of alabaster and exceedingly heavy. "My beloved Hyacinth," the voice added, "is it thus that you are about to deliver my son from the hands of the barbarians, and to leave his mother to their impious insults?" As the saint answered that it was impossible for him, who was so weak, to carry a burden which was so heavy, the voice replied, "If you had a little more faith and a little more love for me, it would be very easy for you to carry it." "I desire nothing so much as to possess that love and confidence," replied St. Hyacinth. "See, I am ready to obey at once." Saying these words, he approached the altar of Our Lady, and with loving respect, stretching out his arms, he placed the statue upon them, and carried it as easily as if it had been a little flower. It was thus that he left the village, the image of Our Lady in his arms, the holy ciborium on his breast, accompanied by his brethren. He passed unmolested through the ranks of the enemy, who, by the permission of God, stood at a distance, and whose eyes were struck with blindness for a time, so that they could not see them. When they had stepped out of the village, they directed their steps towards the city of Cracovia. Here another miracle occurred to console them on their journey. When they reached the banks of the river over which they had to pass, they could find no means of reaching the other side. But full of confidence in the power of the most holy sacrament which he held in one hand, and in the protection of Mary, whose image he carried on his shoulder, he made the sign of the cross. Then, placing his feet on the surface of the waters, he reached the opposite bank without even moistening the soles of his sandals. The religious who were along with him, seeing repeated the miracle of St. Peter walking on the waters, followed him, and also reached the other side of the river, the water not appearing even to touch them. Another miracle, still more marvelous, is recorded in the procession of the canonization of the saint. The river over which they thus miraculously pass for a considerable time afterwards continued to show the impression of the saint's footsteps. When St. Hyacinth reached Cracovia, he placed the ciborium on the high altar of the church, and the statue of Our Lady on one of the side altars. Many other wonderful things are recorded to have taken place there through the intercession of Our Lady, which caused many of people to embrace the true faith and strengthened and vivified the life of faith in the souls of those who already possessed it.